A very good afternoon, all of you. Before we start the program, may I request you all to kindly switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent mode. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Indian Council of World Affairs, it is my pleasure to welcome you all for the panel discussion on the occasion of IORA Day. The discussion is on the theme Securing the Indian Ocean Region towards a cooperative, prosperous, sustainable, and peaceful region. Allow me to brief you about the program. We shall begin the program with an opening session where DG ICWA Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh will deliver her opening address, followed by the special remarks by Ms. Paramita Tripathi, Joint Secretary, Indo-Pacific Division, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Thereafter, we will have panel discussion with a short break of 2 minutes to rearrange the table. With this, may I now invite DG ICWA Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh to kindly deliver her welcome remarks.
Good afternoon and a very, very warm welcome to Sapro House. Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi, chair of today's session, Joint Secretary Paramita Tripathi, who heads the Indo-Pacific Division in the Ministry of External Affairs, distinguished panelists, Captain Sarabjit Parmar, Vice Admiral Anil Chopra, members of the Diplomatic Corps, colleagues from MEA, former DG ICWA Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, and all distinguished guests. Today's seminar, titled Securing the Indian Ocean Region Towards a Cooperative, Prosperous, Sustainable and Peaceful Region, is being held to mark IORA Day. IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, is an intergovernmental organization that was formed in 1977 in Mauritius. In its over 2 decades of existence, IORA has grown in importance, as has its membership expanded from 7 member states to 23, and now it also has 10 dialogue partners. ICWA, as the knowledge partner of the Ministry of External Affairs, organized 2 Indian Ocean dialogues, the Track 1.5 dialogue of IORA in 2019 and later in 2021 in a virtual format. Besides, ICWA chaired the IORA academic group for 2 years between 2019 and 2021. We also organized a workshop on capacity building on UNCLOS. Secretary General of IORA, Dr. Salman Al-Farisi, delivered the 30th Sapro House lecture in September 2022. Thus, ICWA has been a part of the journey of IORA. IORA connects 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Australia, and binds a diverse set of countries in the Indian Ocean region into a regional maritime community in a shared maritime space. The centrality of the Indian Ocean to many great civilizations is well known, and in the present 21st century, the ocean continues with its importance both strategically and economically. Some of the most critical sea lanes of communication, as also indeed the major choke points, are in the Indian Ocean, whether it be the Malacca Straits, the Strait of Hormuz, and Bab-e-Mandeb Strait. We have seen how the ongoing tensions in the Red Sea and attacks on commercial vessels are disrupting trade flows through the Bab-e-Mandeb Strait, highlighting the importance, once again, of maritime safety and security. The Indian Navy has been stepping up its patrolling in the region to contribute to the safety of commercial vessels. India's role as a development partner to the countries in the region and as a first responder is well known. As a resident nation, India is a major stakeholder in the Indian Ocean and in the wider Indo-Pacific region. India's engagement with the littorals of the Indian Ocean is deep. It was in Mauritius that Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced Sagar, India's vision in the Indian Ocean, which stands for security and growth for all in the region. The progress and prosperity of the region is linked with maintaining security. That is the idea behind the concept of Sagar. And this requires a commitment to a rule-based maritime order and respect for UNCLOS and for the countries of the region to work together in a cooperative manner. India chaired IORA from 2011 to 2013, and it was then that IORA identified 6 priority areas along with 2 cross-cutting issues. The 7 pillars of the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, IPOI of India, announced by Prime Minister Modi in 2019, find complementarity with IORA's priority areas. All this makes India's partnership with IORA naturally collaborative. India assumed the vice chairmanship of IORA in October 2023 and now is a member of the IORA Troika, along with Sri Lanka, the current chair, and Bangladesh, the previous chair. In this context, we look forward to the special remarks of Joint Secretary Paramita Tripathi and to the panel discussion. With these words, may I invite Joint Secretary Paramita Tripathi to deliver her special address.
Director General ICWA Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh ma'am, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, namaskar, good afternoon. It's so good to see a filled up room. That always enthuses the speaker. So, as mentioned by Ambassador Singh ma'am, we are gathered here today on the occasion of IORA Day, which commemorates the establishment of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, or the IORA, in 1997. It is an important day for India as a founding member of the IORA, and also for the other 22 member states and 12 dialogue partners who are part of the IORA community. I thank the Indian Council of World Affairs and in particular Director General Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh ma'am for organizing this discussion on a matter of much relevance not only to India but to the Indian Ocean region on the occasion of IORA Day. As many of you may know, ICWA holds a special position in being our knowledge partner for IORA-related matters. In these 27 years that IORA has been in existence, India has been constructively and deeply engaged with IORA to pursue the primary objective of strengthening regional cooperation and sustainable development, emerging as a leading player in the Indian Ocean community. Under India's chairship of the association during the term 2011 to 2013, the area of work of the IORA was streamlined and imparted new focus. 6 priority areas were identified to channelize the energy and the efforts within the IORA. These 6 priority areas are maritime safety and security, trade and investment facilitation, fisheries management, disaster risk management, academic science and technology cooperation, and tourism and cultural exchange. Subsequently, 2 more cross-cutting areas were added during Australia's term, blue economy and women's economic empowerment. We assumed the responsibility of the vice chair in October last year, which will be for 2 years. That will be followed by our chairship of the organization in 2025 to 2027. As vice chair and future chair, India's priorities have been clearly outlined by the Honorable External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar during the last Council of Ministers meeting held in October 2023 in Colombo, and I quote, "To develop an Indian Ocean community that is stable and prosperous, strong and resilient, and which is able to cooperate closely within and to respond to happenings beyond the ocean." The priorities of India, as articulated by EAM, resonate with the theme today. There is no doubt that the prosperity and well-being of the Indian Ocean region is closely interlinked with the security, more importantly, the maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. Today, I would like to share my thoughts on how we can collectively move towards a cooperative, sustainable, prosperous, and peaceful Indian Ocean region. First is appreciating the significance of the Indian Ocean, which holds a central position in the resurgence of Asia and global rebalancing. It plays a crucial role in the development and prosperity of the region by supporting trade and by sustaining livelihoods. The nations in the region are intertwined by shared interests and common challenges. The need for a cooperative, sustainable, prosperous, and peaceful region is not just an aspiration, it is a necessity for our collective well being. Second is by recognizing that cooperation is crucial for regional security. IORA, since its inception, has aimed at regional cooperation, addressing maritime security challenges in the region, such as piracy, IUU fishing, and maritime terrorism, require joint efforts, shared intelligence, and coordinated patrols. Towards this direction, based on the approach of security and growth for all in the region, Sagar, as promulgated by our Prime Minister, India has contributed to build capacity towards strengthening safety and security in the region. India has emerged as the first responder and a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. Third, a sustainable approach is crucial. Sustainable development is not a choice. It is an obligation to the ocean that provides us with resources, connectivity, and livelihoods. The blue economy, with its tremendous potential to boost economic growth, must be harnessed responsibly. Fourth is our emphasis on promoting connectivity. Connectivity is an enabler and a force multiplier for regional economic growth and prosperity. By fostering economic partnerships, investing in maritime infrastructure development, streamlining trade, we can unlock the full potential of the Indian Ocean region. The fifth crucial element is that of peaceful resolution of disputes and dialogue. In a complex geopolitical landscape that the world is today, the Indian Ocean region must serve as an example of peaceful coexistence. A multilateral, rules-based international order with respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity remains the bedrock for a strong Indian Ocean community. It is imperative to maintain the Indian Ocean as a free, open, and inclusive space based on the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas, the Constitution of the Seas. The sixth element that is extremely crucial for lasting peace is people-to-people ties. There is no doubt that cultural and educational exchanges and greater contacts between peoples through trade and commerce in the Indian Ocean region would lead to greater understanding and goodwill, which can break down barriers, build bridges, and foster a sense of community. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that securing the Indian Ocean region requires a collective approach, and in this endeavor, IORA has the responsibility and the potential to bring countries to work together to achieve our shared vision for the Indian Ocean region, to become a space marked by cooperation, sustainable development, peace, and prosperity. I once again thank ICWA and Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh ma'am for organizing this commemorative event marking the IORA Day, and also thank the eminent panelists for their participation. I would urge more and more scholars and experts to work on the Indian Ocean region and the IORA in particular, so that there is awareness, discussion about the significance of this region and the opportunities and the challenges that exist in this region. It would also be useful to have more articles, discussions, policy recommendations with regard to IORA and the Indian Ocean region as we look forward to assuming the IORA chairship next year. Thank you, and I look forward to a productive panel discussion. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable insights. We will now begin with the panel discussion. Give us 2 minutes break to reorder the table.
Should I stand and speak?
Sir, it's your choice. You can speak from there.
Option.
So please continue. He's not keeping well, so he won't be able to join us today. And I request the chair and the panelists to cover his area also. With this, may I now invite Chair Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi to conduct the session.
Thank you very much, Pragya. Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh Ji, Director General, Indian Council of World Affairs. Ms. Parmita Tripathi, Joint Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. I would like to very warmly acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia Ji, Vice Admiral Anil Chopra, Captain Sarabjit Singh Parmar, my very distinguished fellow panelists, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am very grateful to the Indian Council of World Affairs, especially the Director General, Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh Ji, for doing me this great honor this afternoon. It is indeed a privilege to chair such a distinguished panel on such an important subject. As I stand here in front of you, I'm taken back into time, and I'm reminded of the year 2011, when Ambassador Devre was the Director General of ICWA, and India's chairmanship of IORA was just a few months away. And ICWA, in association with Indian Ocean Research Group, organized a conference here on reinvigorating Indian Ocean Rim Association, at that time IOR ARC. It was a very important event, and I think there are some very interesting parallels between that day and today, because the meeting here, the conference here was taking place against the backdrop of the Council of Ministers meeting held in Sana'a in Yemen. That was a moment of great introspection. I vividly remember I was very much present in Sana'a at Yemen for that meeting. And there was a great deal of concern about the future of IOR ARC. It was a very sobering moment. There was an appreciation of the fact that this is the only one and only pan-Indian Ocean regional organization. It is not a matter of choice, but it is a matter of necessity. The region needs the organization. The organization speaks to the region in a very meaningful manner. But at the same time, there was this thought that complacency must not set in. We must introspect. Today, I think we have a similar kind of a moment. Much more to rejoice, much more to celebrate as compared to 2011. Because as the Director General pointed out, that it was during India's chairmanship that 6 priority areas were identified. And that was a turning point, absolutely no doubt about that. And very recently, there was a high-level strategic dialogue on IORA's 25 years called Reflection, Review and Renewal, which happened in Mauritius. It was a very important dialogue for several reasons. Firstly, because now we have 23 member states, 12 dialogue partners. EU has just joined as the dialogue partner. And at the Mauritius strategic dialogue, there was a very open, free and frank discussion as to what is it that IORA has achieved and what is there that is yet to be achieved. There was a great deal of discussion, a great deal of involvement of the IORA academic group. There was a great deal of involvement of Indian Ocean Business Forum. And the message that came out of that deliberation very loud and clear was that now we have to move from policy, wonderful thoughts and ideas, to action. And that reminds me of this speech by Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji in Mauritius, which was the Sagar speech. We all talk about Sagar, but there are very few attempts to really theorize that concept of Sagar. I think there was much more to it rather than just a speech. It was a storehouse of visions in plural, and it was a very passionate call for something which makes IORA very different and distinguished, and that is Prime Minister Modi's emphasis on maritime regionalism. I feel honestly that there was a mention of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam by Honorable Dr. Jaishankar ji in Colombo. I was present there at the 23rd Council of Ministers meeting. Now I honestly feel that the time has come for some kind of a Sagar Manthan, from Sagar to Sagarmala to Samudra Manthan or Sagar Manthan as we call it, which means that there is a great deal of geopolitical churning, absolutely no doubt about it. But at the same time, this is also a moment for great deal of churning of how do we go from where we are now to where we would really want to be, especially as India, like 2011 when India took over as chair. India is going to take over as the chair of Indian Ocean Rim Association from 2025 to 2027. This would be a very important moment against the backdrop of the adoption of the Indo-Pacific Outlook document, where India again took the leadership role. I remember Dhaka conversations at the Council of Ministers meeting. And it is also very important because if we recall that IORA was a tripartite organization in the sense that it was very unique. It was not just SCOs and Council of Ministers, but also academic group and the Indian Ocean Business Forum, that this is the moment of also a great deal of introspection, as the Mauritius dialogue reminded us. Academic group is in need of reforms. Indian Ocean Business Forum needs much more visibility and engagement. And there is absolutely no doubt about it that the momentum that was gathered during G20 summit is going to be now taken forward to IORA as India becomes the chair. So I'm very grateful to ICWA, which has been at the forefront of this forward-looking thinking on a whole range of subjects, including Indian Ocean, for organizing this panel discussion this afternoon. I think it's a very, very important initiative that has been taken. Let me also now have the honor of introducing the panelists to you. Unfortunately, Dr. Pravide could not make it because of ill health. We'll miss him. He has made outstanding contributions we all are aware of. So we have on the panel today Vice Admiral Anil Chopra ji, PVSM, AVSM. Let me first of all introduce him and then invite him to make his remarks. And then I will introduce Captain Sarabjit Singh Parmar when he will make his presentation. Vice Admiral Chopra has the unique distinction of having been the Commander-in-Chief of both the combatant commands of the Indian Navy, the Western Naval Command and the Eastern Naval Command, as well as being the Chief of the Indian Coast Guard for 3 years in the immediate aftermath of the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks. He has been a member of the National Security Advisory Board 2017 to 19 and of the Apex Defense Acquisition Council chaired by the Raksha Mantri ji 2008 to 2011. At sea, he commanded the Western Fleet, the Indian Navy sword arm, the aircraft carrier INS Virat, the destroyer INS Rajput, and the missile corvette INS Kothar. He was the chairman of the Offshore Security Coordination Committee, the National Maritime Search and Rescue Board, the National Oil Spill Disaster Contingency Board, the patron of the Sea Cadet Corps. He has been a distinguished fellow with a number of think tanks, including the Observer Research Foundation, Gateway House, and Vivekananda International Foundation. So I can go on and on. It's such an illustrious career, so many achievements to his credit, but I don't want to stand between him and all of you. May I invite you, sir, to please give your remarks in about 10 to 15 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Is this working? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much, Director General, all of you here this afternoon. A very good afternoon to all. I'm delighted to be here at ICWA, perhaps for the first time. Intriguing subject, and certainly one close to my heart. IORA, couldn't agree more, has done commendable work, taken a lot of initiatives over the last 25 years, brought a sense of belonging to the Indian Ocean region, and has been instrumental in slowly awakening consciousness amongst the strategic community at large. It's a tough job. 23 plus 12 in today's world is unwieldy by any standard. Even ASEAN is considered unwieldy at 10. The world is moving to minilaterals, trilaterals, quadrilaterals. Difficult to get consensus in large gatherings, even more difficult to execute policy decided upon in these places. So I don't envy IORA from the point of view of acting on policies which are formulated, and yet I think it fulfills a function which is important, and we should look at it as a sort of catalyst to various other discussions at various other elements of the strategic establishment. I always like to start anything to do with the sea, with reminding everyone who may not have been to sea about the ocean itself. The first thing is, we all know that the ocean covers 70% of the globe. But do we all know that there is only one ocean? For administrative purposes, we have divided the waters on this planet to the Indian Ocean, Atlantic, Pacific, but they're all interconnected. If you're at any one spot on the water on this planet, you are connected to all oceans. So all these oceans are only administrative conveniences, the names. The ocean is one, and it gives you access globally. If you're anywhere on it, if you have the power, if you have the means, you are everywhere on it. You have legal access to the whole planet. Legal. It belongs to no one. There are no property rights. You can go anywhere you want, should you have the means to do it. And that is a point most people miss. It's one, you can go where you want. It is the greatest highway known to man. There are no terrain, there is no roads, you can move in any direction, and you don't have to worry about the normal infrastructure that we are used to on land. It's still very big, it's still pretty opaque, even to satellites. Ships can still disappear in the wide ocean if they wish to. So it still, therefore, is contested heavily by powers, major powers, superpowers, whatever you have. And now, with modern technology, it has become a threat to the land as never before. In the old days, a ship's cannons could fire 3 miles, and that's why there was this traditional territorial waters which was limited to 3 miles. Then it has become 12. But today, from the high seas, from thousands of miles, or maybe 1,000 miles, ships and submarines can hit targets on land with pinpoint accuracy. For example, as an example to bring this point, the Pakistanis don't have to fly over Indian airspace to hit Bangalore or Hyderabad or Cochin or Chennai. You can be out at sea, no man's land, 1,000 miles away from the Indian peninsula, and still hit land targets with pinpoint accuracy. This is the conventional capabilities of modern navies, which normally escapes discussion. I'm saying all this to set perspective on what I think we are talking about today, including what the Joint Secretary said, that IORA is one of its things is safety and security. Okay, having said that about the ocean, let's talk about the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean is pretty unique. It is a landlocked ocean. It has land all over its northern space, rim, littoral, say what you will. It is only accessible from 2 or 3 different straits, basically Bab el-Mandeb in the west and Malacca in the east. Otherwise, you have to go around Australia or around Africa. Pretty tough to get into the Indian Ocean. And equally tough to get out. If you're in war in the Indian Ocean and you want to get out, it's also difficult. So that is the point I think the Chinese keep in mind too, because it's not an easy ocean to come into or go out of. It's become important for all the reasons we all know. The center of economic gravity has shifted east. There's a lot of east-west trade. There's a lot more important slocks. Many countries depend on their energy security from the Indian Ocean region. Many countries require the Indian Ocean as markets for investment, for resources, and therefore it is contested economically to a very large degree. It's also an underdeveloped area, and therefore it is prone to being manipulated by the powers that be. There are weak governments in many areas, governments prone to tilting over, and there are internecine conflicts by the dozen, all of which makes for a pretty heady mix in the Indian Ocean. So we've seen the oceans, and we have seen the Indian Ocean to very limited time. I can just sort of say a few things. So what are we worried about? What's all this threat we are talking about? Security and safety. What are we talking about? Who is the threat from and who is the threat to? Well, there is first and foremost the traditional Westphalian threat of wars between nations. I don't think either IORA or this discussion actually is encompassing that kind of threat, which is taken, which is sort of analyzed and acted upon by different layers of the security establishment of states, and not by any, sort of groupings which discuss things in general. There is China's interest in the Indian Ocean for energy, for investments, for trade. There is US-China rivalry, there's India-China rivalry, there's AFPAC destable, there's West Asia unstable. So all this is what I call the traditional Westphalian nation-state issues which can come to fore at any time. But organizations like the United Nations itself can't do very much about it in today's day and age. But I don't think IORA should even try to sort of influence how nation states act in their national interests and security interests on a wider canvas. But then they do it by their diplomacy, their military means, their alliances, their strategic partners on a different level. But there is the gray zone, which is basically terrorism and non-state actors, as the Houthis, as everyone mentions. This affects everybody at the, not necessarily at the nation-state level, but normal economy and other things. And today these people are armed with pretty sophisticated weapons. And again, the Red Sea imbroglio has shown it requires navies with pretty sophisticated weapons to address this threat. The Houthis are firing relatively cheap air-to-ship missiles available to everybody, and the only way you can counter them actually is by sophisticated surface-to-air missiles, and we have a whole carrier task group in the Western Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, and within the Red Sea, just doing that. Now that is expensive and can be done by very few. The US, of course, but as you can see, India, China have ships in the region, but are not really engaged in the actual process of defending the hardware which is being thrown at ships. And lastly, there's the basic non-traditional threat, which is pirates, criminals, poachers in the EU. This is where I think IORA and organizations like that can play a really significant part by advocacy, by research, by dialogue. And this is where it's important to have good order at sea, as we say in the Navy, and therefore you can contribute in a very significant way if all the countries on the rim are cooperating on maintaining good order at sea against things like armed criminals who are run humans, run drugs, run a whole lot of things, and they need to be stopped as much as these big threats from different countries and otherwise. So that's where, in my view, the threat really lies on a day-to-day basis. It lies through stability. Everyone wants stability, including China. Everyone wants stability because in an unstable maritime environment, trade is affected, energy pipelines are affected, food security is affected, all these things are affected. So my question was, the threat basically is to stability. And that instability can be brought about by national actors, non-national actors, pirates, armed robbers, anybody. But these groupings such as IORA have a significant place in doing non-traditional, the basic day-to-day good order at sea. I've been asked to speak briefly on maritime domain awareness. It's an acronym which has caught on. The ocean, like I said, is still very large. It's difficult for satellites to identify ships individually, even though they can, get their presence. Now, patrolling, somebody mentioned, is very, very expensive. Fly aircraft and ships round and round in circles looking for somebody. When I was Director General of the Coast Guard, I once went to Key West in Florida, to the U.S. Coast Guard setup there, multi-agency setup, and I asked them, how many people have you got patrolling? And he said, none. So I said, how come? He said, because it's very expensive, we can't afford it. So I said, how do you do it? So he said, we get intelligence. They're looking for drug coming in from Colombia and South America. It's all on intelligence. When we get intelligence, we send a ship or an aircraft. In our part of the world still, we do a lot of patrolling. We just patrol. We send ships and aircraft, the Navy and Coast Guard. And Coast Guard, we started doing it a lot after 26/11. But it's an expensive business, and it doesn't lead to very much of success. But it's a deterrent, so we carry on doing it. But there are, in today's day and age, significantly better technological means to do this and save yourself burning petrol or oil for little reason. That's a different sort of discussion. I'm just putting a few cats amongst the pigeons, so to speak, to generate some discussion elsewhere in some other fora, which all of you participate in. It's not easy to locate, identify ships. And even if you do, then what? Then you have to interdict them. You have to have the means to go and actually interdict them, whether it's getting on them, whether it's destroying them, whether it is sinking them, whether it is boarding them, whether it is whatever. And very few countries, again, have that capacity. There's no point having MDA if you can't act on the domain element. What are we looking for at sea? Everybody. You want actionable intelligence which you can act upon. And the sea, a ship can go in any direction, say 20 miles in 1 hour. In 5 hours, it can go 100 miles any direction. All the maths guy here, pi r squared, you know how many thousand square miles that happens in 5 hours. So telling me the ship was here 5 hours ago means nothing to me. I have to search a very large area where it could be. So MDA is there, but it's more difficult than most people realize. And underwater domain awareness of submarines and other objects and underwater drones, like aerial drones, which are now in progress, is exceedingly difficult. But what I wanted to really make, and people are also reluctant to share all except the basic domain awareness, because they're not going to tell you where their warships and intelligence vessels and research vessels are, or indeed their grave fishing fleets. So while people might have the impression, because in our slides and in our presentations, you see the maps and you see this MDA, and you think everybody knows where everything is, that is far from the truth. It's still very difficult to figure out where everything really is and what it is up to. So I'll wind up on this business of maritime security. It's become an all-singing, all-dancing word. Its ambit is like security. Everybody puts in something, food, energy, etc. But essential security, hard security as we call it these days, is something I think groupings like IORA can discuss, can advocate, can suggest, and I think it has the function there. But as we have seen with the literal failure of the United Nations, it's very difficult to control nations when they are determined to pursue their national interest without any sort of change. And nations will continue, whether it's China in the South China Sea, Israel in Palestine, the US in Afghanistan, or anybody anywhere. Nations will pursue their interests, and difficult for even the UN to do what is required to be done. So the sea also is fair game for navies. Trade warfare, attacking merchant ships in times of conflict is a legitimate end of naval warfare. And that continues in peacetime. Navies are deployed in peacetime to be available to do this, should things happen. And navies deploy for presence, visibility, power projection, even gunboat diplomacy. So what did I end up saying? I think that what we have today is an increasingly aware populace and an increasingly aware strategic community about the ocean and about the Indian Ocean in particular, which is a very good thing. And the more we speak of this in fora like these or seminars like these, the more aspects of that oceanic domain come into focus. And it's not such a cut and dried domain as the land which we are all familiar with. So I'll leave you with these few thoughts to see how in future IORA can contribute to this one vertical. And of course, it does splendid work on trade and investments and other such issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Vice Admiral Chopra. The reason I invited you to come in first was that it is good to start with this very broad, overarching understanding of what could maritime domain awareness possibly mean when it comes to the world ocean. And your reference to the changing meta-strategic geographies of the globe, I thought was also a very, very important point. We are all looking forward to the next presentation, and then we will have a Q&A session. We can have more brainstorming together. But I thought at this particular point, before I invite you to make your presentation, I will just make a very quick mention of the fact that under IORA, if we look at the new charter and the new website of Indian Ocean Rim Association, there is a mention of the following under maritime safety and security: piracy, armed robberies at sea, terrorism, illegal trafficking of humans, drugs, weapons, and wildlife, crimes in the fisheries sector, including illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, degradation of ocean health, including pollution from land and vessels, unlawful exploitation of marine resources, climate change, sustainable development goals, and related repercussions, the important role that legal geographies and the law of the sea play, ensuring freedom of navigation and overflight. In fact, what is very interesting is that we look at the second IORA action plan, which goes from 2022 to 2027. There is an identification of short term, which is about 2 years time span, then medium term, which is about 24 years, and then there's a long-term vision, and the time scale that we're looking at is about 46 years. Now, as India becomes the chair, and I can already see some very important recommendations, policy recommendations coming from your intervention, I hope we will have more such recommendations, which then can also be taken up during the Q&A. I will have a few more points to add later in the discussion when I'll wind up, just before inviting all of you to intervene. With these words, may I now turn to our next distinguished panelist, whose work I have read and admired, like yours, for a very long time. Captain Sarabjit Singh Parmar is an alumnus of National Defence Academy, Khadakwasla, and Defence Services Staff College, Wellington. He was commissioned into the Indian Navy on 1st of July 1987, and he took his retirement in 2023. He is a Sea King pilot who has commanded 2 ships and a frontline anti-submarine and anti-shipping helicopter squadron. He represented the Indian Navy in the first international HOSTAC, which is helicopter operations from ships other than aircraft carriers conference, which was held in Norfolk in USA in 2008. He has served as Joint Director Naval Plans in Directorate of Naval Planning at the IHQ MOD Navy. He has been directing staff at National Services Staff College. As a research fellow at the then Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, ITSA, New Delhi from September 2010 to July 2014, he looked at maritime strategy and security issues in South China Sea and the Indian Ocean region. As Director Strategy in the Directorate of Strategy Concepts and Transformation, he was part of the core team that revised Indian Navy's unclassified maritime security strategy document and doctrine, which was released, as we all know, titled as Ensuring Secure Seas, India's Indian Maritime Security Strategy in 2015. He is at present a distinguished fellow at both the United Service Institution of India and also a distinguished fellow at the Council for Strategic and Defense Research. So, floor is yours, 10 to 15 minutes, please.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me at the back? Thank you. First of all, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very few people would have realized that today is IORA Day. There is so many things happening in the world and India itself, but I think ICWA deserves a lot of credit for bringing IORA back onto the map, and I thank you, Ambassador, for this opportunity for speaking. I'm going to keep my remarks a little short. One is because I have a little bad throat, and second is likely more time for question and answers. I'd like to take off from where Admiral Chopra mentioned stability, and that I think is the key element for Sagar. Because if you take stability as the key element and the other two elements as security and peace, then the more stable the area, the higher degree of security and peace you have. And as stability decreases, security and peace also plummet downward. It's like a stock exchange. If you keep investing, you may get good returns, but the day the weather is bad, you can see a little later down. And therefore, if you have a highly stable area with a high degree of security and peace, that enables a lot of cooperative mechanisms between nations and the maritime forces to address non-traditional threats, and it also ensures a higher degree of maritime trade. And I'll borrow a line from Napoleon where he said, if the army marches on its stomach, then I dare say the global economy sails on maritime trade, and therefore the maritime domain is essential for all nations, including landlocked, as a lot of landlocked nations also ply on the maritime domain out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare two areas. One is the Indian Ocean region and one is the South China Sea, for a meaningful reason. The Indian Ocean region generally has had a non-state actor that has impacted stability, whether we go back to the days of piracy, starting from, say, 1991 when the Somalia government collapsed, to 2008 when all nations and organizations sent in ships for patrolling and for presence. And we know what happened there, but a little bit more on that. And of course, I will also look at the South China Sea. So where you have a state-on-state issue taking place. But the beauty of it is, in the South China Sea, the state-on-state, the degree of violence or the degree of facing of maritime forces is lesser than the Indian Ocean region, where today we have the Houthis firing drones and missiles on targets. So that is the essential difference. So it means that where you have a state-on-state issue, stability will not fall that much. But the moment you insert a non-state actor, it has a heavy impact on stability and therefore security and peace. And having said that, let me look at one more important aspect, that is UNCLOS and the rule of law, which was mentioned now. To compare it, first of all, in the Bay of Bengal itself, we have two very successful arbitrations that have been accepted by the three nations involved, which is Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, and Bangladesh, Myanmar. Whereas in the South China Sea, the quest for a code of conduct has been ongoing for many decades, and we know that this path is almost closed. There's nothing which is coming out. The surprising fact is all the nations who are involved in evolving the code of conduct have similar approaches on UNCLOS, essentially on two issues. One is the innocent passage of warships in the territorial seas and military activities in the EZ, as India and other nations in the IORA have. But despite this sort of convergence, there is a difference in the interpretation of the laws of the sea. And therefore, while UNCLOS, I would say, is more respected in the Indian Ocean region, it is not so respected in the South China Sea, specifically because you have one state, China, has got a differing view of how to do it. And when you remember the Philippines and the China arbitration case, China has been trying to turn the argument on its head, saying that this is not a case for UNCLOS or maritime zones, it's a case of sovereignty. So that's where we stand as of now. And speaking of UNCLOS, and of course, I've been asked to cover the Indo-Pacific Ocean also. One issue that is a huge area for the Indo-Pacific, IORA in the Indian Ocean region and also South China Sea, is the issue of rising sea levels, which is actually would put a new interpretation on the laws of the sea as the years go by, especially where island nations are concerned, especially where low-lying coastlines are concerned, specifically Bangladesh. We are also getting impacted. what would be the status of nations if they go underwater? Would they cease to be a nation state, or would they just be a state of people? And therefore, we are looking at something new, which is called migrant or climate migrants. And this is something I think that IORA needs to take up. There are many issues which will come up like this, but I'm just going one by one out here. And I'll take us back to the Indian Ocean region, where now we have the Houthis who have created the Red Sea into a sort of a war zone. What surprises me most is that despite having allies working under the CMF, or now you have even the EU pushing its own task force out there, the inability to operate together. So my question is, what happened to interoperability? If we have been practicing for so many years nations together to address non-traditional threats, well, this is the testing ground. This is the testing time. And we have allies, NATO allies, not willing to operate under what was the Prosperity Guardian, and we've had them operating independently. So we are actually going back to the early 2000 to 2008, where we have not one NSA, but we have two. We have the pirates re-emerging. We have the Houthis in action out there. So how do you deal with both? Because the solution to deal with both is different. We have been through anti-piracy operations. We know how much time it took for our working groups to get established. It took us at least a better part of a decade to get our act together, for nations to work together, differing national laws, differing rules of engagement, the ability to operate together. And plus we had European nations at one point in time saying, listen, I can either provide ships for the NATO task force, or for the CMF, or for Op Atlanta. I do not have the capacity and capability to do it. So therefore, the moment we set our eyes away from piracy and put it on the Red Sea, we have piracy emerging. For India, that's a very big issue. The reason is the high-risk area. If you do remember, the high-risk area came almost up to our western coast and went almost as south as the mouth of the Mozambique Channel. Insurance rates went up. We had rerouting of shipping even at that point in time. So here we have a double whammy. So India is more concerned, I would say, about piracy, and rightfully so, because it's going to even impact perhaps our coastal trade if the insurance goes up. And as per reports, the rerouting of ships due to the Red Sea in this fiscal year will cost the Indian economy around $30 billion US. And this is just the impact that has started from November. And it's getting worse. So how do you operate together? How do you address a non-state actor? How do you address the resurgence of piracy, if I may say so, according to that? And therefore, we need to look at IORA and maritime forces operating together. And IORA is the political level, and when I speak of maritime forces, I'd make a reference to the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. But about that a little bit later. So let me get back to now, how do we connect the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean region? Perhaps the solutions may have some sort of convergences. There is something we can learn. And I think this is where IORA and ASEAN can sort of work together. And therefore, the question I throw out here is it time to look at IORA centrality as we look at ASEAN centrality? And then perhaps IORA will get the necessary impetus or the kick to look at issues that are specific to the Indian Ocean region. We have nations who are in ASEAN. We have nations who are in IORA. Perhaps ASEAN itself may like to come on board IORA as a dialogue partner, as the EU has. And therefore, we have a fair exchange of ideas at the various platforms that ASEAN provides, where India is on board, all of them. And then, of course, we have ASEAN nations coming on board IORA, either as observers, and ASEAN itself coming on board as an entity. Is perhaps something that we can link up together. And there was mention made of the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, and this is where this connect will come in handy. Today from ASEAN, we have only Indonesia and Singapore who are on board the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. There is one full blank in those 7 pillars, and that is capacity and capability. If we need to address non-traditional threats together, then we need to address this gap, and therefore we need more nations to come on board. And I think that is a clarion call that needs to be taken, for the simple reason that Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative was mooted at the East Asia Summit, and at that point it was said that IPOI would work through the East Asia Summit framework. So therefore, it is not only India's initiative, if you look at it that way, but I would like to put it as a joint India-ASEAN initiative, and then perhaps we can work together and take out lessons from this issue. Therefore, there's a need to expand the ambit of the Indian Ocean Region Rim Association to accept all this. And now let me look at IORA and IONS out here. So we are looking at something that requires a harder response than perhaps IORA had thought that we required to do. Maritime forces cannot operate with the degree of freedom unless they have the national directive and policy. And so therefore, we need to look at a harder response to threats under the focal area of maritime security and safety. And that's something that would need a harder political degree. And if that comes about, then perhaps the ambit of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium itself can go beyond HADR, can go beyond information sharing, and can go beyond working together. I'm not recommending an alliance of sorts. I'm not looking at maritime forces working together in a manner that would be inimical to the national interests of the various states of IORA. But we need to look at this, and this, of course, is something that needs to be discussed. If it is a call for the maritime forces of the Indian Ocean region to operate together, then perhaps the IONS ambit needs to be expanded to look at hard responses against specifically piracy and maybe the Houthis, if anything else is workable in that area out there. Let me talk a little about the other issues. So we have issues like blue economy, we have sustainable development goals that we need to look at. IORA looks at it, BIMSTEC looks at it, and then again we have a cross-channelization of ASEAN nations who are also with BIMSTEC. And if the blue economy is a success on the agenda of BIMSTEC, then perhaps it can be imported into IORA to drive it forward, and also by ASEAN to work at certain things like the blue economy. But then like maritime security, it's difficult to define what exactly is blue economy. So the best is to look at it as a concept and work it out through that area out there, and look at how can we look at blue economy, how do we look at SDGs together, how do we address the other non-traditional threats like IU fishing is one, maritime crime is the other. There's a lot on the table out here. And I'd like to leave you with a thought is perhaps the architecture of IORA may undergo a change. And here I have a reference to Turkey. So if Turkey is going to ensure maritime security for Somalia, there is that understanding out there, which I don't know what is the progress of the talks or the inking of the document. And if Maldives is looking at buying drones from Turkey, then does that willy-nilly make Turkey in time an IOR nation? That would actually change the architecture of IORA. And for India, I'm not sure whether that's a good sign or not. So you'll have to contend with China, you have to contend with Turkey, and we know what Turkey's views are on certain sensitive issues as far as India is concerned. So that's a question that I think only time will tell. And just imagine if Turkey comes on board IORA as a dialogue partner or even an observer in the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. How does that impact? It's a NATO ally. I'm not sure what the US stance would be on it, but I think it's not going to be a very happy situation, so India. So I just thought I'll share these points, and I don't think I've missed out anything. So Samudra Manthan may not be an easy aspect, sir, as you had mentioned. Perhaps we will have a few storms. But it's time, I think, for IORA and IONS to increase the ambit, interact more with ASEAN. And as I said, perhaps we need to concentrate on projecting the centrality of IORA and ASEAN together for a better maritime security environment in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Captain Parmar. Thank you, Vice Admiral Chopra, for your extremely important, insightful presentations. We are running behind by about 10 minutes, but I think the time is just right for us now to open up the discussion for your questions to the panelists, your observations. But let me just flag 2 or 3 points which I think might facilitate a more policy-focused discussion. One is that if we were to invoke our mental maps of the world ocean and then do a quick scan right from the Arctic through the Indian Ocean, Atlantic, Pacific, right down to Antarctica, to the Southern Ocean. It goes without saying that the location that India enjoys, or India has, is unique. No surprise that when India looks with one eye to the Indo-Pacific, India looks at the Indo-Atlantic with the second eye. India is not oblivious, not insensitive to the important transformations and developments that are taking place on the Euro-Asian continent. And India is very much in the Antarctic Treaty, and India would be hosting the next Antarctic Treaty consultative meeting in Kochi. Now, this unique advantage that India has puts India in an ideal position to advocate the concerns of the global south in the Indian Ocean maritime regionalism. So this idea, this vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has a very important maritime regionalism component. And again, it is not surprising that when India looks at the Indo-Pacific, India is not stopping where some other countries will stop. India looks right across the Western Indian Ocean. India looks at Africa. India looks at what is going on in other parts of the Indo-Pacific region. It's a wider understanding and imagination. It is also very interesting, I think, comes out from the presentations made so far, that this is the era of cooperation and international understanding. India is security provider, yes, that is one way of looking at it, but capacity is also security. So India can also be seen as a capacity provider and knowledge provider and collaborator. So we are looking at multilaterals, we are looking at quadrilaterals. Quad can also play a very significant role when it comes to addressing many of the non-traditional security threats. And I think one very important point for discussion, which I think will help enormously when India takes over as the chair, would be the very question of scale. From this global scale, as we come down to the regional scale, what about the sub-regional scale? India has minilaterals with Australia, with France, and one can look at, if you look at the security spectrum that we are talking about, in fact, the traditional and non-traditional, and I think both the presentations have given us a lot of food for thought. Can we think also of minilaterals, which then could address the larger vision, which is a regional vision? Because it is very important, and this is where IORA plays a very important role, that we are thinking regionally, we are behaving regionally, and we are responding regionally to the problems that we face in this part of the world ocean. So with these just few words, may I now invite all of you to please introduce yourself and kindly make your question, comment as concise as possible. May I start with you, sir? Please.
Hello. Hello. Thank you to all the panel members for your insightful discussion. My name is Abhishek Kumar. I'm a research intern here. Sir, you briefly touched upon the aspect of maritime domain awareness. So, cooperation among the regional countries for enhanced and shared maritime domain awareness is crucial to promote stability and prosperity in seas and ocean. So my question is, what kind of efforts and initiatives have been taken by the regional countries in the Indian Ocean region for enhancing the MDA capacities? Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to respond, please? Yeah.
Basically MDA keeps getting enhanced as you collate information from various sources. So the picture that is formed is available to all who are part of a particular MDA cooperative setup. So there are fusion centers, as you must have heard of, and we have one here in Gurgaon itself. So where do you get information about the sea from? You get it from other ships which are already at sea, from aircraft, from shipping agents, from satellites, from submarines, from a whole host of sources. And you put it all together and try and get an idea of how the picture out at sea at any point of time is. But all this is fraught with many issues. You may have heard of AIS, which is now a radio frequencies system which all ships over 300 tons carry, and they're meant to radiate or transmit certain particulars about themselves to everybody in the vicinity. And this has gone to satellite AIS now. But there's spoofing. People turn off the AIS. Warships don't use it. Navy is doing exercises out at sea, playing one force against the other in war games, put off their AIS. And once you have these sort of inputs off, how do you search? How many of you have been out to sea? Hands proof. So it's difficult for most people to understand that the ocean, which appears as a blue patch on your maps or your screens, is a very vast oceanic space. And it's difficult to search even 10 square miles of it sometimes because there's nothing, it's all the same, and there's only wind and waves and weather. So it's not easy to be aware of what is happening around you at sea. But there are means. Ships have radars, they have sonars, there are coastal radio stations, there are radar stations put on offshore platforms. So all this is integrated to get a picture of who is where. And what is that? Why do you want to know that? So that you can act if you have to in real time. You can see patterns developing, you can see threats developing. So it's a pretty fascinating area which comprises of human and technological and signal intelligence, trying to make a sense of a jigsaw puzzle. Because if you see on the internet just a map of the kind of shipping which is there on shipping lanes of today's globalized world, it is enormous amount of different ships, different flags, and you have to make sense of it all. So there is a lot of work being done. Today we are much better off than we were, say, even 10 years ago. Certainly in the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, India in particular is pretty aware of what is there and what is happening, including ships of every nationality that we are interested in. So I hope that leaves you with some sort of...
Thank you. Yes, please. Stuti.
Hello, sir. My question is to Parmar, sir, actually. So you spoke about climate change and, states becoming, there is migration, climate migration. So that's going to affect both stability, peace, and prosperity. So I just wanted to know, because it's an existential crisis for a lot of, especially small island states, but also to bigger states which have huge coastlines with populations on these coastlines, what is the IORA's direction into this? How is it looking into climate migration or this issue per se? Thank you.
Please.
I'm not sure how much of a discussion has taken place on climate migrants, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed. Because if you're looking at IORA as a regional organization for the Indian Ocean region, and we need to be a little bit more serious about it, because if not now, tomorrow, climate migration will start. It's already started in some way or the other. This is going to impact the host nation's societal setup, the economy. It's got a huge ramification. So all this in total actually requires, I think, a much deeper study among all sorts of sciences or social sciences that a nation has got. And also, how will you fit these people? Where will you put them? What will be their status in the international environment if they are living in another nation? So I don't have a clear-cut answer to but I think it needs a lot of thinking. It needs a lot of frameworks. It needs a lot of legislation also, I suppose, would be the bottom side of it when, let's say, India opens its doors and says, all right, we give you this land, this many people. who will build the infrastructure. There's a huge financial implication also. It needs a deeper study. We have to have a sort of a framework and many pathways identifying the places.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I just want to say one thing where IORA can really help. This climate change issue actually came into public consciousness about 25 years ago with Al Gore saying what he did. How much has the sea level really risen along the Indian Ocean littoral? There is no empirical evidence, frankly. We are all on the rim of the Indian Ocean. IORA is well placed to take direct charge of this and actually see how much the sea level has risen, if at all. And, we are flooded with warnings about what is going to happen, and I'm not saying I'm totally skeptical, but what happens in our world today is everything is amplified 100 times. And what in 2000, we were saying by 2020, certain cities will be underwater. Now we are saying it's 30 years away. And after that, we'll say it's 60 years away. So what we really need is empirical evidence to show that there is actually the sort of things that we are envisaging. And these climate fluctuations are not part of patterns that the Earth has always been subject to. Just a thought, but this is something which IORA can seriously contribute. I don't know offhand if the sea level in Mumbai or in the Maldives or in Colombo has actually risen. Even if we start today and if IORA keeps a depository, it might help the climate change debate.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Before I invite the next, I'll invite you just very shortly. Let me just place on table the fact that in Dhaka, it was Bangladesh that proposed that climate change should be placed as one of the cross-cutting issues. As we know, there's a gender empowerment and blue economy right now as the cross-cutting issues. India and few other member delegates were very right in pointing out that we are looking at a very complex issue area. So if you want to put climate change as one of the cross-cutting issues, we need to be more precise and we need to be more concise. Linking that to what Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar said, I remember, I think it was Colombo, he talked about climate justice. And very rightly so, while talking about the challenges that small island states play. Again, in Mauritius, this issue came up as to in what ways could IORA approach the challenge of climate change, migration issues, displacements for certain. And IPCC 6th assessment report, we were deeply involved empirically as well. There's a lot of data in the IPCC 6th assessment report, including the second working group 2 on adaptation about the sea level rise. The suggestion that was being made, and I warmly endorse that suggestion and also made it, was that we could probably include climate change on one of the priority areas along with disaster management. And climate change, because it has mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage, we could focus on adaptation. And this is where we will be closer to the notion of climate justice. But it goes without saying that IORA in the times to come, and I hope that during India's chairmanship, this will come again for a very concrete thought process and action. The climate justice. Say, for example, there's a lot of discussion in IORA right now about the small scale and medium scale businesses. And IUU fishing, there was a very interesting working group set up on small scale fisheries in the Indian Ocean. And I think given the IUU fishing, the role that small scale fisheries play, climate justice, adaptation, and the focus on climate action, I think there is a lot of scope for India, as India takes over as the chair and decides to focus more on the issues of broadly understood maritime safety and security issues. Now I'll invite you to please.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Kuvamjeet Singh from Team GeoJurist. So my question revolves more along the lines of the rising amounts of piracy. So, sir, given that some entities around the world obviously benefit from peace being an unattainable goal, so just like in the golden days of piracy in the 1700s, how we had famous pirates of Francis Drake ending up becoming buccaneers and privateers for big superpowers back in the day because they'd use them to sow chaos against their enemies. is it possible that the same thing could happen again in the future, perhaps even a very thing just around the corner?
I think that's a fascinating question, at least for me. I'm glad we haven't forgotten privateers in all this piracy. But yes, basically, going back to that same age, Walter Raleigh once said that he who commands trade commands the world. The world has always traded right from ancient times, and that trade can be disrupted and stolen and carried away. So I don't see pirates being, in today's day and age, under command and control of larger powers like Elizabeth I use these people. But I think today's piracy is more, quite frankly and correctly, due to the failure of governments ashore, like in Somalia, which allows then that land area to be used as a haven for criminals, basically. So it's not in the region of national or great power issues like it was between England and Spain, for example. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, please. And then I'll come to you. And then I'll come to you. All right.
Two quick points. I'm Dr. Chopra. One is that the Indian Ocean has got 7,000, intelligence indicates, 7,500 Chinese trawlers operating here, and most of them are dark fleets. Some of them are weaponized. I mean, they can, carry weapons. So to say that domain awareness is not something possible, we have to find a solution, and the only solution is through satellite surveillance in various orbits and trying to pick up radio signals and locating these trawlers, etc., because they can play havoc. And another point which I want to make is that IORA has been sleepwalking. Actually, the Chinese have come in, and if you place the head of the octopus on Hambantota, their tentacles are spread everywhere, to the east, to the west, to the south. Then now latest intelligence indicates they're going to Mozambique to build a base in Alicante or some place like that. This thing may be, So they've gone to Tamu. They've built the port of Tamu. We have done nothing. Because we are the only other IORA, we are in fact the only IORA navy or a nation which can take on the Chinese. They're here in full strength.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Would you like to please?
The comment?
Comment. It's more of a comment rather than a question. That's any thoughts?
Dr. Chopra actually is Admiral Chopra, another Admiral Chopra, and I wouldn't like to comment. Well, actually I will, because I disagree a little bit on what he just said. And the Chinese don't have many bases here. They have places. A base is somewhere where you can take a ship which requires to be repaired after action, ammunitioned, and it has to be secure. Neither Hambantota nor any of the other places which the Chinese have is secure. They can be taken out pretty fast. Djibouti, everyone talks about, it's surrounded by American, Japanese, all sorts of bases. The first requirement of the base is to be secure. The only secure base the Chinese have is Karachi, because in Karachi they can get their ships repaired if their weapons need attention, if their ships need attention, they can ammunition. Hambantota in a conflict scenario is different. And maybe since you've started me off on this, a few other points. It's very easy in peacetime for ships to come in and out of the Indian Ocean and Malacca Straits. In times of conflict, this will not be the case. And those ships which are inside will find it difficult, as I said in the beginning, to egress. The sum total is, while the Chinese are here in a very big way, there is nothing, we should not paint them as 10 feet tall at all. They have severe vulnerabilities in the Indian Ocean. They have no bases except one. The lines of communication are stretched. Their ability to fight at extended distances is minimal. They have no combat experience in the Navy for the last 400 years. And therefore, when you look at it in perspective, whilst we must be fully aware of what the Chinese are doing, we need to understand that in the Indian Ocean, the Chinese are vulnerable. And vulnerable only if we have the means to do something about it, which we are developing. But I agree with Admiral Chopra that they had too many of these smaller intelligence, fishing, and other trawlers, which are sometimes under the radar. And of course, the answer is satellites, but satellites are expensive. And there are these geostationary satellites at 36,000 miles cannot see anything. Low orbital satellites make a pass in, the satellite mechanics are such that ships can move out of the range of the satellites in different orbital passes. In the US, they launch a satellite when required in a particular crisis developing. 20-odd satellites can be launched by the Air Force. It requires a lot of money, requires a lot of ready satellites. I don't think we are there yet. And the high-tech warfare, as we see it today, is also a question of money. Finally, if I may end on this note from my side, all our talk, all our discussions finally require money, budgetary support. Not only for the Navy, whether for IORA or for the Navy, it all requires money. And when we look at solutions, in India, we tend to talk of many intellectual solutions without looking at the money. Where's it going to come from? Do you have the money? Do you have the budgets? And if you don't, yes, satellites can do a good job, but do we have the sort of funding or the capability till such times? So they say navies are expensive weapons and only rich countries can actually afford effective navies because it's hard to build and very difficult to operate. And we are reaching there. And the good news, if I may say to this audience, is that due to sustained efforts of all our forebears since independence, we have built a three-dimensional blue water navy, which makes its own aircraft carriers and its own nuclear submarines in the country, which is an enormous thing to do in just 75 years. But there's a long way to go, and there's a lot of money required, but with our economy, maybe that'll happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Captain Parmar, you
Just
wanted to
add a few
respond.
words on this. As long as they're fishing in the high seas, there's nothing anybody can do. That's one issue, right? Other issue is that more or less they enter the EZ of nations who either don't have the capacity or capability to stop them from entering. There are a few nations who have taken hard action. Indonesia is one. If you remember, in the Natul oil fields, they burnt one of the Chinese trawlers. And there was, I think, Peru, Coast Guard, had a standoff with the Chinese trawlers who were supported by the Chinese Coast Guard. So the question of how will you deal with it, we have an MZ Act of 1981 that looks at fisheries. So we have the legislation, but to enforce it. The other main point is that, we always look at the Chinese. There are many other nations whose trawlers also operate in similar fashion. So if you are willing to take action against the Chinese, then we should be able to do it with the other nations whose trawlers come here. So there's a few issues. It's easier said than done, but we need to look at it.
Please go ahead. Yeah. And ma'am, I'll come to you after that. Please introduce yourself as well.
Good evening, everyone. I am Aditya Kumar Sel from Delhi University, KM College. Sir, in one of your lines, you mentioned that it's very expensive for any nation in the terms of the patrolling charges to be cured for as in the part of the intelligence. So my question is how India is tackling this issue, as we have seen this earlier in the 2611 case, like the Indian Navy and the Indian Coast Guards were unable to find out like what is going to happen, and then later we had to face so much. So.
Okay. All right. I think you.
It's difficult to keep, what would I say, a very effective surveillance system 24/7. There is human fallibility, there is gaps that will emerge, and with time, things do sort of tend to relax a little. I think the question is not the issue of money, but the question is that update on technology, learn from the lessons of other nations, keep an eye out for activities that are happening. And I think over a period of time since 2611, we've done quite a bit. Quite a bit has been done. But having said that, gaps will always remain. So that is something we'll have to accept and live with. The issue is that even if there is a gap, your timely response, again, it comes to the fact of, money for capacities and capabilities and who will do it. So we have the zones distributed between the Navy, Coast Guard, and the Maritime Police and all that. And therefore comes the issue of interoperability within the country of these forces who are supposed to undertake these sort of missions. So focus should be on that.
Thank you. I can see a number of hands going up, but please give me a little time. Ma'am, after you, please.
Nina J. Gupta, I'm a co-founder of the Indian Ocean Comparative Education Society. I want to say that I've just recently returned 3 days ago from visiting Southeast Asian nations, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. And I visited an area called the Golden Triangle, where these three countries have been very inimical to each other, and they are each one of them keeping high security, double time, mountain, because they are across the mountain, so they fear people are going to come again and invade them. And so they have double security. Can't we sort of form a kind of a triangle between 3 and 4 nations together? Because as someone said, it's very expensive to keep security and terrorism away. So if we get together, cooperate with each other, maybe we could form a much better.
Right. Thank you. I mean,
Stronger.
conceptually, theoretically, what I capture from your statement is that can we think of innovative minilaterals to realize maritime security?
Minilateral, that's right.
Minilaterals, right? I think all panelists will agree with.
I agree with you, ma'am. It's
Yeah.
in fact, I'm a big fan of trilaterals, to be honest with you, because trilaterals, you can pick up one agenda, discuss it, come with a time plan, come with an action plan, and graduate to the next. So the idea is you need to look at nations who look at an aspect with a lot of convergence, and then they should be able to thrash it out. So one example I can give you is even in IPOI for that matter, is that ASEAN nations, IORA nations combined together, we can form a lot of these trilaterals or even maximum 4 quadrilaterals, not to call it a quad, and go after an agenda one by one, or you have a number of them working together, where you have one nation who's the lead nation, who has the capacity, the capability to actually host, convene, take a lot of the load off the other nations, and that's one way of looking at it.
I'm afraid, thank you very much. I'm afraid we have run out of time, and may I submit that those who have questions, please join us over a cup of tea, and we can carry on with our conversation. I cannot thank ICWA enough, like always. I think always ahead of times. And as India prepares itself for the chairmanship of IORA just in 2025, I think there's a lot, I'm sure, that will be happening at ICWA, because even if we take just one priority area out of the 6 that India proposed way back 2011, maritime safety and security, and I think Dr. Jaishankar also made it very clear in his observations that this would be certainly one of India's key concerns, then I think we are looking at a lot of work in the sense that first of all, if we do the SWOT analysis, the strengths and weaknesses of IORA, we would see that the time is long due now to move from policy pronouncements to concrete actions. So action plans need to be worked out. There is a working group for maritime safety and security. These are called WGMSS. We have search and rescue, we have maritime crime, we have information sharing, we have maritime partnerships, we have the objectives, and so on and so forth. So if an Indian Ocean dialogue is long due, I'm very hopeful that India would not only host the Council of Ministers and SEO meeting, but there would be a summit level meeting here. The last that happened was in Indonesia, and I think against the backdrop of G20, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, this Sagar Manthan is now due. I think the nectar will come out in terms of some very solid, long-lasting contributions from India. Indian Ocean dialogues will also have to be organized. And I think I can already see ICWA partnering with other institutions and centers of excellence, focusing on each one of these areas so that we are all ready as a collective member states, dialogue partners, observers of IORA to take this wonderful mission forward. So many, many sincere thanks to you, ma'am, for giving me this honor, to my two wonderful distinguished panelists. Thank you so much. To all of you, I feel truly honored and privileged, and look forward to many more such conversations in times to come. And Pragya, I'm sure tea is waiting for us.
On behalf of the ICWA, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Ministry of External Affairs, in particular Joint Secretary, IP Division, for joining us today and sharing her valuable insights. I would like to thank our esteemed chair and panelists for today, and we have benefited immensely from your views. I thank the audience for their valuable participation. Now I invite all of you to join us for high tea in the foyer. Thank you all once again.